I didn't think anything of it at first. That's probably the worst part, looking back. If I had thought it was strange right away, I might have stopped him, or at least asked a question that mattered. It was already late, not absurdly late, but late enough that the building had settled into that quiet where you can hear the pipes knock and the heating cycle through like it's breathing. I was sitting on my bed with my laptop open, pretending to work, actually scrolling, when I heard movement in the hallway. Just socks on cheap flooring, normal sounds. Ethan came out of his room wearing jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie. No jacket, no gloves. His hood wasn't even up. I remember noticing that because it was cold. Not kind of cold, not throw on a jacket cold. This was the kind of cold that makes your nostrils sting the second you step outside. The weather app had sent alerts all day, wind chill warnings, stay indoors unless necessary, that kind of thing. "Heading out?" I asked, mostly out of habit. "Yeah," he said. He hesitated, like he was about to add something, then didn't. "Just for a minute." I nodded. That was it. That was the whole exchange. No tension, no argument, nothing that would make it stand out if I replayed it out of context. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look upset. If anything, he looked distracted, like his mind was already somewhere else. He grabbed his phone from the counter. I noticed his charger was still plugged in, his backpack still by the door. That registered, too, faintly, the way unimportant details sometimes do. The door closed behind him with that soft, final click. I went back to my screen. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I didn't check the time exactly, but I remember the feeling of it, the way the quiet stretched. The heat kicked on again, loud, rattling. Outside, the wind scraped against the building like something dragging its nails. At some point, I got up to get water. I looked at the door, half expecting to see him coming back in, stomping his feet, complaining about the cold. He did that sometimes, exaggerated misery, like it was funny. The door stayed shut. I told myself he probably ran to the car, or went to smoke with someone outside, or realized he forgot something and went to a friend's place down the block. All of those explanations felt reasonable enough that I didn't need to test them. I went to sleep. In the morning, his room was still dark. His bed looked the same. The hoodie he usually wore was gone, but everything else was there. Phone charger, wallet on the desk, keys in the bowl by the door. That was when the feeling started. Not panic, not yet. Just a quiet sense that the timeline was off somehow, like a song that comes in half a beat too early. I texted him. No reply. I told myself it was nothing. That was the second mistake.
By noon, I couldn't pretend it was normal anymore. The cold hadn't let up overnight. If anything, it had gotten worse. The local news anchor kept using the word dangerous in that flat, responsible tone, like saying it enough times could make people listen. Ethan still hadn't answered. No texts, no calls, straight to voicemail. I knocked on his door, even though I already knew he wasn't in there. It felt stupid, but I needed to hear the hollow sound of it. I pushed it open. His laptop was on the desk, closed. His jacket was hanging on the back of the chair, the heavy one, the one he always wore when it dropped below freezing. That was when my stomach tightened. I called his phone again, just to hear it ring somewhere nearby. Nothing. No vibration from under a pillow, no buzz from between couch cushions. It wasn't in the apartment. Around 1, I called campus security. I tried to keep my voice steady, like this was a normal administrative thing, not me slowly realizing something was very wrong. I told them my roommate hadn't come back after going out late. that it was extremely cold, that he wasn't answering. They asked questions in a careful order. What was he wearing? When was the last time I saw him? Did he seem upset? Was he intoxicated? Did he have a history of mental health issues? I hated that question, not because it was offensive, but because it felt like a drawer they could quietly file him into if the answer was yes. I said no, because as far as I knew, that was true. They said they'd note it. They said he was an adult. They said to check again later. By evening, his parents were on their way. I'd never met them before. They arrived bundled up, faces tight with that specific fear people wear when they're trying very hard not to panic in public. His mom hugged herself constantly, like she couldn't quite feel her arms. His dad asked the same questions again and again, not because he needed the answers, but because repeating them kept him busy. Everyone fixated on the same thing: why he went out. He hadn't taken his jacket, he hadn't taken his wallet, he hadn't taken his car, he hadn't told anyone where he was going. Just for a minute. Search teams went out that night, flashlights cutting through the dark. The temperature dropped into numbers that didn't feel real. I stood by the window and watched their lights move slowly, methodically, like they were combing the ground for something fragile. I kept thinking he'd come back embarrassed, cold, annoyed, that this would all end with a story he didn't even think was worth telling. But somewhere past midnight, I stopped believing that. The next day blurred. More people, more questions, flyers printed and taped to poles, even though half of them peeled right off in the cold. I watched strangers study his face like it was a puzzle they might solve if they stared long enough. They found him on the third day. Not far. That was the part no one could explain. Less than a mile from the apartment, in an area you wouldn't walk to unless you had a reason. Not scenic, not a shortcut. Just there. They said it was hypothermia. They said it gently, like tone could soften the word. I remember nodding, because that explanation had weight. Cold kills people. It happens. It's tragic, but it's simple. Except nothing else about it was. Because even now, years later, I still don't understand why he walked out that door like he did. No urgency, no preparation, no destination. Just into the cold.
They told us where they'd found him, but not exactly how to picture it. Just a general area, a stretch of ground near a surface road that cut behind a row of unused buildings, a place you'd drive past without ever thinking to stop. When I finally went there myself later, I understood why they kept it vague. There wasn't a clear spot to point at, no bench, no doorway, no reason to be there at all. The police said he hadn't been robbed. Nothing suggested a struggle, no signs of a fall or an accident. He just ended up there. People kept saying exposure, like that wrapped everything up neatly. Exposure to cold, exposure to the elements. It sounded passive, like the weather had simply happened to him while he stood still. But Ethan didn't stand still. Anyone who knew him would tell you that. He paced when he talked. He shifted his weight constantly. He hated waiting in lines because he said it made his legs itch. That detail got stuck in my head for some reason. His legs itching while he stood somewhere in the dark, the cold biting through his jeans. His parents stayed a few more days to handle paperwork and arrangements. I tried to stay out of their way, but there's no good way to exist in the same space as people who are grieving someone you last spoke to alive. His mom thanked me for calling when I did, which made me feel worse, not better. Like she was grateful for something that clearly hadn't helped. Before they left, his dad asked me again about that night. Not angrily, not accusing, just tired. Did he say anything else? Anything at all? I searched my memory like it was a crime scene. I replayed the sound of Ethan's voice, the way he'd hesitated, that tiny pause before just for a minute. I told him no, because there wasn't anything else, and because saying that pause out loud felt like inventing meaning where there probably wasn't any. After they went home, the apartment felt wrong. Not empty, crooked, like a picture frame that's slightly off level but not enough that you notice until it drives you crazy. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way the door sometimes didn't latch unless you pulled it hard. The draft near the baseboard that made the floor cold even when the heat was on. Small stuff. One night, maybe a week later, I woke up because I thought I heard movement in the hallway. Socks on the floor, that same soft sound. For a few seconds, still half asleep, I was convinced he was back, that this whole thing had been some elaborate misunderstanding, and he was about to mutter something sarcastic and grab water from the sink. When I opened my door, the hallway was empty. The front door was still locked. I told myself it was grief doing what grief does, your brain reaching for familiar patterns, filling in gaps. That explanation made sense. It was comforting in a way. Except it kept happening. Always late, always quiet, never enough sound to be sure of, and always followed by that same thought, uninvited and stubborn. Why did you go out? I don't think Ethan planned to die. I don't think he was running from anything. I don't even think he knew where he was going when he stepped outside. That's what bothers me most. Because sometimes, late at night, when the apartment is too quiet and the heat clicks on and off like breathing, I catch myself standing by the door, not putting on a jacket, not grabbing my keys, just thinking about stepping out, just for a minute.
The first time I noticed myself doing that, it scared me enough that I laughed out loud, a short, stupid sound. I actually said, "Get a grip," to the empty kitchen. That helped for maybe an hour. I started sleeping with my door closed, not locked, just closed. I told myself it was to keep the heat in, but really it was because the hallway had started to feel like a place things happened without me. I also stopped checking the time when I woke up at night. At some point, I realized the sounds, when they came, always felt like the same hour. Not exactly the same, but close enough that my body seemed to recognize it before my brain did. That stretch of night when everything is technically quiet, but you can tell the world hasn't fully shut down yet. I tried staying up through it once, made coffee around midnight, put on a show, sat on the couch with all the lights on like that would change something. Around 2, I felt ridiculous and tired and turned everything off. The apartment settled. Pipes, wind, nothing else. I was just starting to drift when I heard it again. A soft scrape, then another, slow, careful, like someone trying not to wake anyone. My heart was beating too fast for how little was happening. I lay there staring at the dark, telling myself I was done with this, that I wasn't going to play along with whatever my brain was doing. After a minute, I got up and opened my door. The hallway was empty, same as always. But this time, the front door wasn't fully shut. Not wide open, just not latched, the kind of gap you only notice when the line of light doesn't look right. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, waiting for some rational explanation to float up. Draft, old building, I must have not closed it properly earlier. Except I hadn't gone near it. I closed it carefully until I heard the click. I tested it. Solid. That night, I dreamed of cold. Not dramatic cold, just the kind that seeps in slowly, starting at your ankles, convincing you it's manageable until it isn't. The next morning, I found footprints outside the door. They weren't clear. The snow had blown around overnight, filled things in, erased edges. But there were places where it had been compressed just enough to suggest someone had stood there for a moment, facing the door. No clear tread, no obvious direction, just the sense that someone had been there, thinking. I didn't call anyone about it. I didn't take pictures. I stood there until my feet went numb, and then went back inside and tried to forget what I'd seen. That was around the time I started wearing my jacket indoors.
It wasn't a conscious decision at first. I'd put it on to take the trash out, then forget to take it off. Hours would pass before I realized I was still wearing it, sitting on the couch, zipped up like I was waiting for a bus. When I noticed, I'd feel embarrassed, like someone had caught me doing something private and irrational. I told myself it was stress. Trauma does weird things. Everyone knows that. I even Googled it one night. Sleep disturbances, hypervigilance, fixation on environmental factors. Cold sensitivity came up more than once. Seeing it written in clinical language made it feel manageable, like something with edges. But there were moments that didn't fit. I started finding my shoes closer to the door than I remembered leaving them, not lined up neatly, just angled toward it, toes pointing forward, like I'd kicked them off in a hurry. Once I was sure I'd left them by my bed. I stood there, holding them, trying to reconstruct how they could have moved without me noticing. There was no missing time, no fuzzy gap, just a blank space where certainty should have been. I began locking my door at night. That should have fixed it. It didn't. The urge was the strangest part. It didn't feel like a thought. It wasn't a voice. It was more like a physical suggestion, the way your body leans before you realize you're about to stand up. A restlessness that had direction without explanation. Toward the door. Always the door. I'd be brushing my teeth and feel it, lying in bed scrolling and feel it, a quiet pressure, like the apartment itself was slightly tilted and I was slowly sliding. I never went, that's important. I need to be clear about that. I never opened the door and stepped outside. But I did start standing there, sometimes with my hand on the knob, sometimes just close enough to feel the cold leaking through the frame, that thin line of winter sneaking in no matter how high the heat was set. The air there smelled different, sharper, cleaner, like it was already outside, waiting. I thought about Ethan a lot during those moments, not in a dramatic way, not images of him freezing or lost, just the memory of his pause in the hallway, that fraction of a second where he'd seemed undecided, like he was listening for something I couldn't hear. I moved out at the end of the semester, packed fast, didn't look back much. The new place was warmer, newer, tighter, no drafts, solid doors, deadbolts that slid into place with a reassuring weight. For a while, I slept better. Then, one night, weeks later, I woke up with that same feeling. Not fear, direction. I sat up in bed, heart steady, already knowing where I was about to go. The apartment was silent. The heat hummed softly. Everything was fine. I stood. I took 2 steps toward the door before I stopped myself. I don't remember deciding to stop. I just did, like hitting the end of a leash you didn't know was there. I stood in the dark, breathing, jacketless, listening to my own pulse. That was the first time it occurred to me that whatever had taken Ethan out into the cold hadn't stayed there. It had learned the way back.
I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the edge of the bed until the sky started to lighten, watching the door like it might do something on its own. When morning came, I felt stupid and wrung out.
like I'd spent the night arguing with myself over something that shouldn't exist. I told myself the same things again. Stress, habit, your brain latches onto patterns when it doesn't get closure. I even said Ethan's name out loud just to see how it sounded in the new place. It felt flat, like saying it into insulation. For a while, things were quiet. Weeks passed. I started to relax. The feeling didn't disappear, but it dulled, like a scar you only notice when the weather changes. I went back to classes. I met people. I stopped wearing my jacket inside. Winter deepened. The night it came back properly, I was studying late, past midnight. Snow had been falling all evening, thick and steady, the kind that muffles everything. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked through the window, the streetlights glowing like they were underwater. That was when I noticed the cold. Not the room temperature. That was normal. This was different. A thin band of cold air, low to the ground, brushing against my ankles. Familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. I stood up slowly. The front door was closed, locked, chain in place. Still, the cold was there. I crouched and pressed my hand near the base of the door. The draft was stronger than it should have been, like the seal wasn't doing anything at all. I leaned closer, and that smell hit me again. That clean, sharp outside smell, snow and distance. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I nearly dropped it. It was a text from an unknown number. Just one line. "You don't need much time." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. I didn't reply. I blocked the number. I told myself it was a wrong text, a prank, spam that happened to land on the worst possible words. That explanation almost worked, except my hand was already on my jacket. I stood there for a long time, fingers curled into the fabric, breathing slowly, deliberately. My body felt ready in a way that scared me, calm, like this was something I'd done before. I thought about Ethan's shoes by the door, his keys left behind, his jacket hanging uselessly on the chair. I took my hand away. The cold receded, not at once. It pulled back gradually, like something disappointed but patient. The next morning, I deleted the text and tried to move on. But now, every winter, when the temperature drops low enough and the night gets quiet enough, I feel it again. That subtle pull, that suggestion without words. I understand something now that I didn't before. It doesn't drag you out screaming. It doesn't chase you. It doesn't force anything. It just waits for a moment when you're tired or distracted or slightly off balance and offers you an excuse to step outside, just for a minute.
Last winter, someone in my building went missing for a night. That's how it started. A note in the lobby, printed paper curled at the edges from the heat. "Have you seen this person?" A photo taken at a party, half smile, arm around someone cropped out of frame, name underneath. Apartment number 2 floors above mine. They found him the next morning, alive. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. People talked about it like a funny scare. He'd gone for a walk, couldn't sleep, needed air, lost track of time, his phone died. That was the story he told anyway. I saw him once after that, in the stairwell. He looked normal in the way people do when they're actively trying to be. Clean, awake, focused on not thinking. He didn't meet my eyes. After that, I started paying attention. Not obsessively, I don't think, just noticing. The way people lingered by the exit at night, the way conversations sometimes trailed off when someone mentioned the cold, the number of jackets left hanging untouched during storms. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to. One night, coming home late, I found the front door of the building propped open, just a crack held by a rock. Snow had drifted in, thin and white, like someone had tested the temperature and changed their mind. I kicked the rock away and pulled the door shut. The lock slid home with a heavy sound that echoed more than it should have. For a moment, I stood there with my hand still on the handle, breathing in that familiar smell. Outside. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough that my fingers went numb through my gloves. I wish I could say I'm stronger than Ethan was, or smarter, or that whatever this is only takes people who are already broken in some obvious way. But the truth is, it feels democratic, patient, like it's not interested in who you are so much as when you're weakest. I still live alone. I still lock my doors. I still tell myself that what happened to Ethan was a tragedy with a medical explanation and nothing more. Most days, that's enough. Some nights, when the cold gets sharp enough and the world goes very quiet, I feel that same tilt, that gentle suggestion, and I understand how easy it would be to stand up, leave everything behind that proves you meant to come back, and step into the dark without really deciding to. Because it doesn't feel like leaving. It feels like responding.